Have you ever noticed that the more you give, the more you're ignored? That the more you chase, the more people turn away? That's right. Society lies when it says generosity always returns double. It doesn't. It returns with contempt, because the world doesn't respect those who give themselves away on a silver platter. The world respects those who are hard to reach. Machiavelli once said, "Politics is guided by reality, not ideals." And reality is brutal. If you give too much of yourself, you'll be used, discarded, and replaced without even a thought. This is why the nice guys suffer. They believe the end justifies the means only for the cruel, when in reality it also justifies detachment. The world doesn't reward your loyalty, your honesty, or your dedication. It uses all of this against you. The friend who knows your fear of being alone will manipulate your neediness. The partner who senses your need to be loved will hold on to that affection as a bargaining chip. And every time you beg, every time you expose yourself too much, you lose value. Want a reality check? Better to be feared than loved. Because love is fickle. It changes with the seasons and betrays when it suits it best. Fear, on the other hand, breeds respect, discipline, and obedience. And you may not like it, you may even find it harsh, but look around. Those who gain power are not those who beg for affection, but those who know how to use silence and coldness as weapons. It is the calculated use of force, not gentleness, that defines who commands. Stop believing that nonsense, that absolute transparency breeds trust. The truth is that those who expose themselves too much become predictable, and predictability is weakness. The secret lies in being enigmatic, saying less than you feel, showing less than you think, letting the mystery work for you. Those who can't read your mind will be forced to project their own fears and desires onto it, and that's where true power is born, when others go crazy trying to decipher you. And what happens when you stop chasing? The tables turn. The very people who ignored you start chasing. Those who discarded you begin to beg for your presence. The rare becomes valuable, and absence becomes obsession. This isn't magic, it's strategy. It's virtue combined with fortune. And Machiavelli already knew. He who controls his own attachment also controls others. He who needs no one becomes necessary to everyone. When we talk about power, most people immediately imagine external enemies, declared rivals, armed competitors, betrayals engineered by third parties. But the true poison doesn't come from outside. It's born within. It's the anxiety that corrodes decisions, the fear of loneliness that paralyzes movement, and the childish need to be loved that undermines any strategy. Machiavelli, who observed rulers like someone reading the soul of a chess player, once said, "He who feels too much is the first to fall." And it wasn't a poetic metaphor, it was a practical observation. How many leaders have you seen lose everything because they couldn't control their hearts? Well, it wasn't the enemy's spear that felled them. It was their own weakness. This insatiable need to be important to someone is an invisible chain. One can wear the crown, have wealth, and boast loyal armies of their own, but if their self-esteem depends on external applause, they're already defeated. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that the masses change their opinions like the wind changes direction. Yesterday they applauded, today they boo. And if the ruler, or even the common man, bases his strength on this applause, he becomes hostage to the moods of others. It's like building a fortress on quicksand. It inevitably crumbles. What's needed is an unbreakable mental armor, where the ego doesn't need approval to sustain itself. See it in real life. A professional who doesn't know how to handle criticism loses promotions because they react angrily in meetings. An investor who gets carried away by euphoria buys stocks when prices are high and panics when they're low. Both were dominated by the same invisible enemy, uncontrolled emotions. This is why the phrase, "the end justifies the means," carries such weight. It doesn't mean a lack of morals, but rather that when the goal is great, one cannot be a slave to fragile feelings. Better to be feared than loved, because love is fickle, but the respect imposed by discipline endures. And it's not just about avoiding tears or suppressing anger, it's about understanding true human nature. Those who constantly need validation will be easily manipulated. Those who are terrified of being alone will seek companionship at any cost, and thus will be exploited. Those who desperately want to be seen as virtuous will fall into the trap of the appearance of virtue. And nothing is easier to control than someone obsessed with appearing righteous. That's why Machiavelli repeated, "Avoiding hatred is essential, but depending on the love of others is the shortest path to defeat." What's required then is constant adaptability. It's not the coldness of a stone, but the clarity of someone who doesn't allow themselves to be swept away by emotional currents that can't control the tide. Note, a leader who masters silence can listen without despairing, can observe without revealing themselves, can wait without imploding inside. They don't chase love, nor do they run from fear. They simply remain centered, and it is precisely at this point that the enemy within stops dictating the rules. But here begins another, even more dangerous story. When we don't control our emotions, someone out there learns to use them against us. If the internal enemy is already dangerous, imagine when the external one senses this weakness. The world, after all, doesn't reward loyalty, vulnerability, or love. It turns them into ammunition against you. People silently observe where it hurts, and when they discover it, they press mercilessly. This is how the most subtle manipulations are born. That compliment laden with ulterior motives, that promise never fulfilled, that embrace that hides the knife. Machiavelli didn't romanticize these dynamics. He knew that politics guided by reality, not ideals, is made of the calculated use of force and the exploitation of human weaknesses. When someone displays excessive attachment, they become predictable. The manipulator knows that simply threatening to leave is enough to make you beg to stay. They know that simply withholding attention is enough to make you give in faster than you should. This applies to relationships, work, and even international politics. Rulers who needed the people's approval were easily controlled by populist rhetoric. Those who cultivated virtù and fortuna were able to turn the tables. They didn't depend on popular affection, but on their ability to constantly adapt and the clarity that in the end, those who hold the reins are those who don't tremble for love. Consider a modern example. Tech companies know that emotions are more profitable than logic. Social networks were designed to exploit the human need to be loved, liked, and noticed. Each notification is a small burst of dopamine, a reinforcement that conditions behavior. This isn't coincidence, it's emotional engineering. Just as generals in the past used their own loyal armies to subdue enemies, today companies use algorithms to subdue your attention. The vulnerability isn't in the codes, but in those who don't realize how they're being guided by the desire for importance. It's hard to admit, but emotional attachment means strategic weakness. It means being predictable. And predictability is death in the power game. That's why Machiavelli valued leaders capable of making decisions based on real human nature, not sentimental illusions. The prince who allowed himself to be carried away by love or hate ended up betrayed, while the one who maintained self-control even used other people's emotions as a tool. Remember, those who cry too much reveal where they bleed, and those who reveal where they bleed will always be attacked first. Coldness, in this sense, is not the absence of emotion, but mastery over it. The individual who knows how to remain silent when provoked, smile when annoyed, or walk away when pressured becomes a mystery. And mystery is fertile ground for fear and respect. While most expose themselves trying to prove love, fidelity, or virtue, the strategist observes in silence, letting others indulge in their own confessions. And it is precisely this contrast between attachment and detachment that gives rise to the advantage. But to understand it, we must understand the next point: the true value of emotional detachment. Detachment is not lifeless coldness, nor is it mechanical indifference. Rather, it is clarity. It is as if the individual removes the fogged glasses of passion and for the first time sees the whole board. Machiavelli understood this. Those who detach govern, those who cling are governed. It is not about killing the heart, but about preventing it from taking the wheel on roads where only reason can guide. Think of a poker player. The winner is not the one who feels most intensely, but the one who keeps a stone face while inwardly calculating their opponent's every move. Silence in this game is one of the most powerful weapons. When someone doesn't give in to their emotions, their words gain weight. A dry response, a calculated look, a restrained gesture say more than 1,000 desperate justifications. This is where the calculated use of force comes in. It's not about always acting brutally, but applying pressure only when necessary, with the exact intensity. The end justifies the means, and the means in this case are chosen with almost surgical precision. While most people get lost trying to explain their feelings, the strategist lets mystery work in their favor. In practice, detachment is the difference between being a slave to rejection or a master of choice. Imagine someone who, when left aside by a group of friends, doesn't beg, argue, or humiliate themselves. They simply walk away with the calm of someone who understands that losing their place doesn't mean losing themselves. This kind of attitude makes others uncomfortable because it breaks the logic of predictability. And here a powerful irony arises. While the attached chase, the detached are pursued. Is it better to be feared than loved? In this context, yes, because fear is born of uncertainty, and uncertainty attracts. Historical examples confirm this logic. Leaders who remained unattached to flattery were respected. Generals who didn't tremble at the loss of soldiers knew when to retreat and then win. Politicians who didn't beg for popular approval built stronger legacies than those who lived at the mercy of the masses' moods. Virtue and fortune together have always favored those who knew how to act with constant adaptability, not emotional dependence. Life on any scale rewards not those who feel the most, but those who best control what they feel. Emotional detachment, therefore, is discipline. It's an invisible armor that protects against the chaos of human relationships. And this discipline isn't innate, it can be trained. A simple way to start is to practice silence, listen more, speak less, respond only after thinking. Another is to cultivate hobbies that don't depend on external approval, such as learning an instrument, reading Machiavelli, or investing in solitary activities that strengthen the mind. With each practice, the need for affection weakens. But here's the fascinating detail. History shows us that this detachment has already decided entire wars, and it is precisely in historical lessons that the secret becomes even clearer. History is a cruel theater where uncontrolled emotions have always played the villain. Kings who allowed themselves to be dominated by fear of losing their thrones ended up ceding territory. Generals who hesitated out of pity to send men to the front lines lost entire battles. Machiavelli saw in these cases a confirmation of politics guided by reality, not ideals. Governing was not about being just or compassionate, but about maintaining power. And to achieve this, it was necessary to recognize that sentimental attachment was a luxury only the defeated could afford. A classic example is Cyrus the Younger, who launched himself against his brother in a war of succession. His emotional desire to prove loyalty to his allies led him to attack rashly, and he was killed in the first battle. Compare this to Cesare Borgia, exalted by Machiavelli. He did not hesitate to eliminate internal betrayals, even if it meant acting brutally. His calculated use of force made him feared, and this aura of fear, more than love, was what ensured his permanence. Better to be feared than loved, after all, because fear does not waver as easily as passion. And don't think this is a thing of the medieval past. During World War II, leaders who indulged in emotional attachments lost their clarity. Chamberlain, with his obsession with the appearance of virtue, tried to appease Hitler in the name of peace. The result? He was manipulated and demoralized. Churchill, on the other hand, adopted the coldness of detachment. He spoke tough, prepared his own loyal armies, and preferred to be seen as intransigent rather than be loved for concessions. The end justified the means, and the means, in this case, were resistance and strength. Even in the corporate world, this logic repeats itself. How many CEOs have lost companies by clinging to outdated business models when they should have exercised constant adaptability? The story of Kodak, for example, is a portrait of this era. It dominated the market but clung to photographic film like someone afraid of losing a child. Meanwhile, detached competitors created digital cameras. This emotional attachment cost billions and the relevance of a century-old brand. Machiavelli would call this ignoring true human nature. People want the new no matter how much you love the old. These examples make it clear those who hesitate out of fear lose. Those who act with detachment build. And it's not about being cruel for pleasure, but about understanding that the game of life is not decided by intentions, but by results. Fortune favors the bold, not the insecure. And boldness often requires the discipline to silence the heart and listen only to reason. But for this not to remain just distant theory, it needs to be transformed into daily practice. How can we apply detachment in our daily lives? That's where practical rules come in, true tools for shielding the mind and maintaining control. Enough distant theory. Let's get to what truly strengthens the mind on the battlefield of everyday life. The first rule is simple. Expect betrayal. Not as someone who lives paranoid, but as someone who knows that true human nature is flawed, self-serving, and shaped by convenience. If you assume that everyone can fail you, every gesture of loyalty becomes a bonus, not an obligation. This already eliminates half the disappointments that enslave hearts. Machiavelli said that avoiding being hated was essential, but expecting betrayal was prudence. He who prepares for the stab doesn't bleed when it comes. The second rule, control your reactions. Life will always poke at your pride, whether with a malicious criticism, an unexpected rejection, or a clear injustice. The mistake is reacting in the heat of the moment. The wise man knows how to feel, but doesn't just hand over the reaction. A practical example, in a work meeting, instead of immediately responding, write it down. Breathe. Then, respond by email with solid arguments, making it clear that you're not a puppet of your own emotions. This is politics guided by reality, not ideals. The world doesn't value those who shout the loudest, but those who strike with precision. The third rule is controlled exposure. Give affection, yes, but without dependence. Show appreciation, but never everything you feel. Say less than you think. The more others believe they know everything about you, the more weapons they will have. The calculated use of force, in this case, is psychological, showing only what is useful to build trust, but never your whole soul. A leader who opens their heart too much loses respect. A partner who gives themselves without reservation becomes a slave to the other. Better to be feared than loved, because excessive love creates expectations, but fear creates space for respect. The fourth rule is to cultivate mental armor, and this requires daily discipline. Meditation, reading authors who don't caress the mind but challenge it, like Machiavelli, Nietzsche, or even books on Stoicism. Physical exercise also helps, because it trains the mind to endure discomfort without complaint. Think of a boxer. He doesn't enter the ring expecting affection. He enters ready to take it and give it back. That's the mindset. If you want to have your own loyal armies, start with your mind. Train it to be loyal to you, even when the whole world tries to invade. The fifth rule is active detachment. It's not just about accepting that you might lose, but about putting yourself in situations that prove your independence. Travel alone, leave without warning, turn off your cell phone for a few hours. Show yourself that you don't need others for fuel. This practice generates virtue, the inner strength that, combined with fortune, makes any individual resilient. And it's curious, the more you detach, the more others try to cling to you. The paradox is irresistible, but the true magic of detachment begins to shine when we understand the power of silence and unpredictability, weapons that disorient even the most controlling. Few weapons are as underrated as silence. In a world where everyone talks too much, justifies themselves too much, and exposes too much, remaining silent is almost an act of psychological warfare. When someone attacks you, expecting an immediate reaction and finds nothing but calm, confusion arises. Silence disarms because no one can fight what doesn't respond. Machiavelli already pointed out, decisions based on true human nature show that human instinct fears what it doesn't understand. And silence is precisely that, a space where the other person gets lost because they don't know if you are weak, strong, sad, or prepared for the blow. And here comes the second weapon, unpredictability. When your actions don't follow an obvious pattern, you become uncontrollable. It's like facing your own loyal army that never attacks the same way twice. Rivals don't know where to aim, partners don't know how to manipulate you, and even allies remain on alert. This aura creates respect, often greater than any overt display of force. The end justifies the means, and sometimes the most effective means is not to act, but simply to not act, letting the other person implode, trying to guess your next move. Emotional mystery is pure psychological dominance. People have a need to classify, to fit in, to predict. When they can't read your mind, they begin to project their own fears and desires onto it. And therein lies the secret. You don't need to say anything to exert control. A leader who remains calm in the midst of chaos makes subordinates believe they know more than they actually do. A romantic partner who doesn't reveal all their emotions makes the other person question whether they've already lost control of the relationship. It's the old maxim, better to be feared than loved, and nothing causes more fear than emptiness interpreted as depth. Want a practical example? Imagine a salary negotiation. The boss says, "Unfortunately, I can't raise it right now." Most people would react with desperation, trying to argue, begging for justifications. The Machiavellian strategist takes a deep breath, remains silent, and responds with a simple, "I understand." This short, unpredictable response plants doubts in the boss. Will he resign? Will he look for another job? The power wasn't in the request, but in the absence of one. Politics guided by reality shows that, in many cases, not reacting is more impactful than reacting. This interplay of silence and unpredictability creates an almost supernatural aura. You become greater than your words because people begin to speak for you, trying to interpret even the smallest gestures. It's the same strategy used by great generals who, with a few movements, made their enemies retreat simply out of fear of the unknown. But the true power of this detachment isn't just in dominating other people's minds. It's using it as a filter to separate those who are truly allies from those who simply want to take advantage. And here we enter the strategic function of detachment, the next step on this ladder. Detachment isn't just a way to protect yourself emotionally, it's also a strategy to reveal who's truly on your side. When you don't chase, when you don't beg for attention, when you don't demand justifications, false allies disappear on their own. It's as if silence were a natural sieve. Those who stay are those who see genuine value in you. Those who leave are merely opportunists. Machiavelli understood this when observing courts and kingdoms. True allies remained even without immediate rewards, while sycophants dissolved at the first sign of coldness. This is the most effective test of loyalty there is. And here's a crucial point: never seek closure. This modern word, so popular in relationships, means wanting explanations, justifications, closing conversations. But in a politics guided by reality, not ideals, absence is the most powerful response. Those who don't receive an explanation are forced to deal with emptiness, and emptiness is unbearable for those who have always sought control over you. The end justifies the means, and the means here is simple: not giving the satisfaction they expect. Silence is punishment enough. While you move on, the other person rots in the labyrinth of their own unanswered questions. Indifference is the highest form of revenge. Don't yell, don't hit, don't humiliate. Just take away their energy. It's like cutting off a fish's water. It doesn't die because you attacked it, but because it can't live without what you offered. This principle applies to personal relationships, workplaces, and even political disputes. Leaders who withdrew strategic support at key moments have destroyed entire empires without shedding blood. The calculated use of force isn't just physical, it's also emotional, and sometimes the most lethal force is simply refusing to pay attention. This strategic detachment separates the strong from the weak, because those who depend on your reaction are already under your control. Note, when someone insists that you say what you feel, it's because they're insecure. When someone demands an explanation, it's because they've lost control. By maintaining a firm and indifferent stance, you assume the position of master in the psychological game. It's better to be feared than loved, because fear comes from uncertainty, and uncertainty arises precisely from your ability to not let yourself be trapped. It's in this space that you create an aura of almost unattainable power. And perhaps most interesting is realizing that this strategic detachment doesn't kill connections, it merely filters them. The right people remain, the wrong ones disappear. And this frees up time, energy, and clarity to focus on what truly matters. This is the path that transforms the pain of letting go into discipline, and discipline into virtue. But there's still a step higher, when detachment ceases to be merely defense and strategy and becomes the essence of power. And it is at this final stage that the individual becomes untouchable, immune to manipulation, and capable of using even emotions as tools rather than shackles. Here we reach a point few have the courage to enter: detachment as a final transformation. At this stage, emotions cease to be chains and become tools. It's not that you don't feel, you do, and perhaps even more intensely than before. But the difference is that now you are no longer hostage to that feeling. Fear becomes a compass. Anger becomes fuel. Love is distributed as a choice, not a necessity. Machiavelli, observing leaders of his time, saw that those who reached this level became untouchable. They didn't beg for respect, they cultivated it. They didn't need to prove anything, They simply selected who had the privilege of being close to them. At this level, the individual understands that they don't need everyone. They choose some. This choice is conscious, calculated, and based on true human nature. They aren't swayed by appearances of virtue or sugar-coated speeches. They recognize that the end justifies the means, and that, to remain steadfast, it's often better to be feared than loved. But contrary to what the naive think, this fear doesn't come from open violence, but from unshakable serenity. Silence becomes a weapon, coldness a shield, and the predictability of the other, a puppet in their hands. The final stage of power also reveals an irony. The less you need, the more others need you. It's the boss who never begs for employees and, precisely because of that, attracts the most competent. It's the person who doesn't chase relationships and, paradoxically, is pursued with greater intensity. It's the company that stays focused on its vision without bowing to immediate public approval and ends up shaping entire markets. This is the fruit of virtue combined with fortune, the ability to transform coldness into magnetism and silence into obsession. And make no mistake, this stance doesn't create isolation, but control. You don't close yourself off from the world, you just don't hold on to it. And precisely for this reason, when you decide to open up, the impact is multiplied. One word from you, after long periods of silence, echoes like a decree. A gesture of affection coming from someone who doesn't overdo it is worth a treasure. The calculated use of force here isn't about always punishing, but about choosing with surgical precision when to act and when to simply let the void speak for you. This is the point at which the individual becomes immune to manipulation, untouchable, inaccessible to the drama of others, self-possessed, master of the game, and not because they've built impenetrable walls, but because they've learned to use emotions as soldiers under their command, not as tyrants dominating them. Silence and coldness at this stage cease to be defenses and become psychological weapons of control. And this is where the cycle closes. Those who have reached this point discover that power lies neither in being loved nor in being feared, but in being impossible to manipulate. So tell me, how long will you insist on chasing after those who don't value you? How long will you waste energy trying to prove what should already be obvious? Life has no mercy for those who beg. It only respects those who learn to let go, who transform silence into a weapon and coldness into a shield. Machiavelli had already warned, the end justifies the means, and if your end is freedom and power, your means can no longer be want. Ask yourself now, who in your life truly deserves your energy? Who is by your side because you chose to be? And who is simply taking advantage of your need? The answer may hurt, but it is this pain that separates the strong from the weak. Better to be feared than loved, because fear breeds respect, and respect opens doors that love never held for long. Are you willing to stop offering yourself? Are you ready to watch others chase you when they realize they can no longer manipulate you? This is the choice that defines who will be your own master and who will forever be a puppet. The calculated use of force begins not with others, but with you. With your discipline, your mental armor, your ability to wait without begging. And now I challenge you, what will you do after this video? Will you go back to your usual routine, complaining about other people's ingratitude, or will you apply the detachment that transforms silence into respect? The only one who decides that is you, and you alone. If this content resonated with you, if it sparked something in you, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Here, you won't hear fluffy advice, but real strategies to never be manipulated again. And I ask you, are you ready to play the game as Machiavelli would teach?